my tech producer moment there.
Hello, Internet. We are the Music Nerds Record Club, and this is starting year 2, season 2 of the Music Nerds Record Club. I'm Teacher on the Radio out of Cookeville, Tennessee, and joining me tonight is Scott Greenberg from Charlotte, North Carolina, Amy Rock from Nashville, Tennessee, Rick Quinn from Nashville, Tennessee, and Joe from New City, New York, just up the river from New York City. We're trying a whole new format today. We're going to do what's called a record poll. Rick is going to lead us off, and then all the rest of the co-hosts will join the stream after Rick's opening salvo. And I think tonight we're going to be talking about Elvis and the Beach Boys. I can't wait to see what Rick has for us tonight.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. And like you said, I pulled an idea for this month's gathering of the Music Nerds Collaborative, the notion of a record poll, which I adapted from Susan Roger and August's book, This Is What It Sounds Like, What the Music You Love Says About You. Now, in Chapter 1, they explain that a record poll is when a group of friends or colleagues get together and play music for one another. The rules are rather loose. First, you must choose records that are personally meaningful to you to share with others. For this poll, I'm sharing the music I remember from my childhood, touchstones from my parents' generation that have stayed with me. So buckle up and let's head back to the mid-1970s. Our canvas is the mid to late 1970s and the Carter administration. The nation sought to treat its collective hangover from Watergate and Vietnam with a forced infusion of patriotism, fireworks, and apple pie at America's bicentennial celebration. The two records I pulled to jumpstart our discussion are both songs from my parents' teenage and young adult eras, but they're imprinted on me by cultural markers and moments from the 1970s. The first song is In My Room by the Beach Boys from their 1963 album, Surfer Girl. But I encountered this song through their mid-70s compilation double LP, Endless Summer. Endless Summer was generated as a reaction to the newfound nostalgia for the early 60s, marked by George Lucas's 1973 piece of cinematic Americana, American Graffiti. The double LP of the band's 1962 through 1965 output resurrected the popularity of the group to a new generation of fans. While the album is heavy on songs about surfing and hot rods, it was the gorgeous harmonies of the melancholic ode to adolescent isolation and sanctuary, In My Room, that imprinted itself deep into my psyche. It would be nearly 2 decades before I immersed myself in the ways in which Brian Wilson crafted the feeling of disconnection and longing in lush soundscapes on the album Pet Sounds, but the building blocks were all here in My Room. There's something powerful and still haunting about Wilson's desire to escape in the ephemeral safety of one's home bedroom. The turmoil of pre-adolescent and adolescent concerns seemed so monumental at the time, and the desire to be grounded in safe thoughts and tumultuous emotions may be seen as naive, but it's a central preparation for finding balance in adult life. As a preteen, I knew nothing about Brian Wilson's agoraphobia or his tumultuous relationship with his father. But the sadness encased in gorgeous harmony and intricate production opened a door for me to get in touch with my own sense of social discomfort. It's my first memory of finding myself within music, and probably one of the reasons I return over and over to music that plumbs sadness and why I hate Don't Worry, Be Happy. My propensity to be decimated by Phoebe Bridgers' wishing on a Chinese satellite begins here in this song. As Sting says, I guess we're not alone in being alone. It's August 16th, 1977, and I'm riding in the back of my parents' mid-70s Cutlass Cruiser station wagon, a spacious land yacht that my dad had to sacrifice his 1967 Pontiac GTO for when my younger sister Valerie was born in 1975. We were on Cloud Springs Road in Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia, returning home on a sweltering southern summer day, one of those days where the faux leather seats or the chrome lap belt buckle could inflict first-degree burns on careless kids in shorts. The radio announces that Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, has died at his home in Memphis of heart failure. He was 42 years old. It's hard to describe now the profound impact that this had on my parents' generation and on Gen X children. Elvis's death was more than the passing of a celebrity. It was magnified into the loss of a cultural symbolics. It was the death of Camelot in 1963 all over again. It was a touchstone that wouldn't be replicated until the 1990s in the death of Princess Diana. A key feature of our parents' youthful rebellion was gone. And with it, grief settled in that ushered in a revival of nostalgia for Elvis's music, movies, and presence. This is how my generation met this towering figure of American culture. I immersed myself in Elvis's catalog and felt the authenticity of his ability to embody the depths of sadness in his brilliance as one of America's premier song interpreters. From Old Shep to Are You Lonesome Tonight to Separate Ways, Elvis delivered a kind of soulful authenticity to grief and desolation unmatched until Karen Carpenter picked up the torch in the 1970s until her untimely death in the early 80s. But it's a song of stubborn hope that grabbed my young aspirations and that I carry today, a hope against hope. The song is inseparable in my memory from the dramatic photo of a tan, white suit-clad Elvis performing it on the NBC soundstage in 1968. The song is If I Can Dream, and it closes the, quote, comeback special broadcast. Elvis is 33, but on the verge of being consigned to the dustbin. He hasn't performed live in 8 years and has been exiled to a series of cheesy movies and tepid soundtracks. Now, at 11 years old, I'm still mostly unaware of the cataclysmic impact of the events of 1968, but they're conveyed to me obliquely in Elvis's passionate yearning. If I Can Dream is not a typical Elvis vehicle. The brass opening and swelling streams seem more typical of Sinatra's crooning than Elvis's hip grinding. But the hints of Hammond organ cross live wires with Elvis's own grounding in Southern gospel, and he pours his whole being into this prayer for peace. The longing juxtaposed with America in 1968 seems hopelessly naive. But when it courses from Elvis's center, I believe it. I swear I hear his voice begin to break when he sings of a, quote, trembling question. And as it builds to an emotional peak, he desperately claims that out there in the dark, there's a beckoning candle. Dear God, help me. I believe it. I believe even in my unbelief. I don't know if the song connects with my passion for justice as much as it awakened it in me. There's a straight line from Elvis here to the way I moved later in 1983 by Bono's promise that though torn in two, we can be one. And those are my songs and reflections for the record pool. All right.
That was great.
Thanks.
I had a lot of thoughts. I'm
What
also,
are your thoughts?
yeah, I had a lot of thoughts. One, we share, Rick, sort of a propensity for grief songs. I don't seek them out, but I think they might seek me out. And no, it's just about somebody who can relay that feeling that you've got, so it speaks the same way. And I made me think of Mark Kozlik and Red House Painters and Sun Kill Moon, and what they do and how betrayed I was by him turning out to be a colossal jerk face. What I didn't know about that Elvis special, I thought the comeback special was an in the round performance with his old trio. I might be completely confused about that, but there was some special that had Scott or DJ Fontana and
No, you're right. That was a main part of it. This song was just the closing number.
Okay. It's good. It's
Yeah. Have any of y'all seen? I think it's on Netflix, the documentary about this '68 special.
Not yet.
Yeah, it's. I won't say too much about it, but Joe, you talked about the in the round thing. Apparently, Colonel Parker who made terrible decisions for Elvis, wanted this to be like and there's footage of that wasn't used, it to be like a cheesy, variety hour type of thing. And because Elvis was so freaking nervous, he hadn't performed live in years. He brought his crew with him to kind of keep, to keep him less anxious. And during breaks, they would gather in his dressing room in the round and play these songs together. And one of the producers was like, "Wait a minute, this is what the special needs to be." And so they sort of threw the script out and just let him be himself.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
That's awesome.
I grew up being kind of anti-Elvis. Like in our house, it was like what hippies and we don't like. We like the Beatles in this house.
Right.
So I tried today when I listened to this song again, be like, okay, if it was just anybody else, what is this song? And I liked it a lot better. It's taking out the Elvisness of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I completely misunderstood the assignment because I listened to these and I listened to them and I listened with the ears focused on their impact on Rick as a kid. And I'm thinking, in my room is just, I can picture you maybe, and I'm projecting maybe because I was an awkward kid.
Mm-hmm.
I had many days in my room where I dreamed of a life outside of my room. And I felt like Elvis had like a similar kind of thing. And I didn't really see it as like a call for peace. I just saw it as like one man's desire for a better life, which is just shame on me. I didn't see the big picture. So I appreciate you bringing that up. But I definitely felt that there was a connection between the two, that sense of, isolation and just wanting something more and just
Mm-hmm.
constantly getting beaten down and just discouraged.
Mm-hmm.
Joe or Scott, did either of you have an Elvis phase when you were little?
No, but I have a vivid memory of when Elvis passed away, and it was shortly after Groucho Marx passed away. And as a kid, I loved Groucho. He was like one of my early comedic influences. So I was sad when Groucho passed. When Elvis passed, I was pissed because it took the attention away from Groucho.
Mm-hmm.
Still Groucho's thunder.
See,
I actually remember where I was when Elvis died,
Mm-hmm.
and how seismic that was.
But Joe, didn't ever have your Elvis moment though as a kid?
I mean, I had it more as an adult. We the things I grew up listening to off of my mom were Streisand and Manilow and Neil Diamond and the great Jews of I'm a Jew for people out there. It's it's all these sort of 70s middle-aged poppy things I grew up with.
We had all those in my house, plus Barry White and Stevie Wonder.
Yeah, no, we didn't do that.
So Amy, you're too young to, I think, to have had that. And you're clearly saying Elvis was already kind of not cool, right? But I had Rick, you on one of your slides, you had American Graffiti.
Yes.
The movie poster. So I had Happy Days, and Happy Days. I mean, really, Tuesday night, Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley Three's Company. I mean, it was a family ritual. And at my house, my mother gave us a television allotment, right? And so on that, on Tuesday,
background.
What's that?
I said, who's got coughing people in the background?
It's me. Rick, you need to mute. Yeah, Rick's mute when you're not talking then. Yep. Okay, so here we are. It's the Smith house in the 70s, and I couldn't watch whatever my afternoon show was during on Tuesdays because Tuesday night was Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley Three's Company. So I think it was my dad who said, well, if you like Happy Days, you have to see American Graffiti.
Mm.
And so then I saw American Graffiti, and the opening of American Graffiti is Rock Around the Clock by Bill Haley. And I think around this time I got into Sha Na Na. So before I got into the Beatles, and Bob Dylan, which then it was U2 and REM later, but it was 50s. That was my first love. So it was Buddy Holly. The Buddy Holly story movie comes out around this time with Gary Busey. Right. So I had Buddy Holly, Bill Haley and the Comets, Chuck Berry, Little Richard. I went through a whole rock and rockabilly phase at this point. But I remember once going to the record store to Peaches at the mall and having I think $5 or $10 to spend on a record, and I think it was probably $5.
So Andy, I want to connect American Graffiti to your Tuesday night viewing habits. American Graffiti featured Richie Cunningham,
Ron Howard,
Suzanne Summers, Chrissy Snow, and Cindy Williams, Shirley Feeney.
So I think my dad knew. I'm almost sure it was my dad that turned me on to American Graffiti. I mean, I think he knew that I was going to dig on the Ron Howard.
Yeah.
Do you remember your nickname for one of your many nicknames? Not Slimy. Do you remember your other nickname for me?
Oh yeah. You were always like the hybrid of Bono and Richie Cunningham.
You told me I don't remember the Bono. Well, I was trying to be Bono, but you told me I was the Richie Cunningham of the punk generation.
Yeah, that too.
I will never forget that.
And I loved Happy Days as a kid. The show did not age well.
I don't know how badly it aged, but I remember going and buying an Elvis record. It's one of the first records that I owned.
Let's keep in mind, Happy Days inspired the phrase "jump the shark," and for good reason.
Right.
Yes, it did. I don't know if it was a good reason, but you are absolutely right. One of the things I came across, and you were just discussing it, Andrew, is this is the era where certain things that we now take for granted emerged. Like there was no classic rock station before this wave of nostalgia hit, and so George Lucas resurrects the Beach Boys, and then all of a sudden you have a radio market for quote unquote classic rock, and then Elvis is the first legacy act after this 68 special he has to Vegas and just cruises through his old stuff for the diehard fans. That was an unusual thing at the time, and now we've got I don't know how many legacy tours are going on all the time in our present day.
And they're barely the bands that are legacy touring now are barely the band that they're supposed to be that they're legacying.
But
right.
so Elvis was really the one who kind of minted the whole Vegas residency, really, of like serious contemporary artists.
Yeah.
Did who saw the Elvis movie?
Not me.
Most recent one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Rick, you should have assigned that too. But I somehow did not have the comeback special on my radar, but it figures quite prominently in the Elvis biopic, and I was really moved by that portion of the biopic, and it was my point of entry for this. I mean, and I think people think of this as Elvis wasn't. I don't know. Elvis wasn't Jefferson Airplane or Buffalo Springfield or anything like that, or Jimi Hendrix or anything like that. But this song was kind of his movement moment song. It was his entree to the, to the real world. And in the film,
in the Ghetto came.
Is that after this or before that?
I think so. I think that's like 70s.
Yeah.
And that might be one. I don't know if he ever went to Muscle Shoals, but no, I think that's the first Elvis song that grabbed me. And then I went backwards. And then I read the Guralnick books,
He does like a medley too. There's like a kind of like an Americana medley that's kind of like quasi patriotic, but also kind of more symbol. It's not like Uber. It's not like the kind of. It's not Toby Keith, et cetera, et cetera. It's not the kind of like Uber nationalist trash that we bang people over the head. It's more 1976 Jimmy Carter patriotism that you get in he does I think it's like a medley of like maybe 2 or 4 songs that he does on one of his last live albums and it's I'm gonna look it up. I think he does the Battle Hymn of the Republic though.
Yeah, he does, and unfortunately, I think he weaves it in with Dixie, but yeah, I wanted to come back to and take up for Scott Greenberg's interpretation. Scott, I don't think you were off. I think you're seeing another whole depth to it. While Elvis is talking about the big picture, I think you're absolutely right that in the context of that 68 special about his own insecurity on his career and where it's taken him, I think you hit the nail on the head that he's also emoting stepping into his own skin again for the first time and since the 50s.
Yeah, I thought that both could be right when you made that point. I mean, he could be singing to both things at once.
Yeah.
I think not a big stretch to. Yeah.
I'd like to talk about the Beach Boys for a second. While I was listening to in my room, I wanted to listen to some of the songs that were released around it. Some of the non-Pet Sounds Beach Boys songs, and while I was listening to it, I'm like, "Ooh, I have a cold take here. Beach Boys are really good," and I don't know, just nothing's like that. The harmonies, I'm the one who's not listening to the lyrics. I just want to get into the musicality of something.
Right.
Just no one does the harmonies like that they do. People try to do that, but it's just so. I don't know. I don't have words for it.
I think a lot of people have that moment with the Beach Boys because they, there's so much cheese that runs on a parallel track to their brilliance, and it's if you catch the cheese train by accident, then when you actually hear the non-cheesy stuff.
I remember them being on like the oldies radio and being like, oh, it's just kind of like
let's go something now.
I want to jump on what Amy and Joe were saying, and that I thought the Beach Boys were like a flaming hunk of cheddar. And my entry point into appreciating the Beach Boys were a couple of things. Reading the Brian Wilson, one of the books about him, that made me appreciate him. And it was like hearing another artist who was influenced by the Beach Boys. When I heard the Chills' Heavenly Pop hit and the Wonderments' Proto Pretty, and I'm like, these are both songs heavily influenced by the Beach Boys. And I thought, I don't like the Beach Boys, but I love this. And it's influenced by the Beach Boys. So it made me take a look at myself and go, okay. And then I went back to the Beach Boys. I'm like, okay, I don't need Surfin' USA, but God Only Knows brings me to tears. Sail on Sailor is weird and I fucking love it. Sloop John B is weird and I love it. Even like something like Wouldn't It Be Nice has depth. Good Vibrations has depth. Brian Wilson was a genius. Mike Love is a buffoon. And once it was just, I needed to see them through the eyes of, or hear them through the ears of other artists so I could appreciate them. So thank you for leading me to that, Joe, because Joe, with his introduction of the Chills Submarine Bells, led me to that.
Yeah, gosh, you're welcome. Carolyn No, that's a song I love.
That's a great one.
Yeah, that's the one that really stuck its nose in me in a good way.
And going back to American Graffiti, I'm like, who had it on their bingo card when that movie came out that in a couple of years George Lucas would change the world with Star Wars?
Right?
Yeah.
I recently showed American Graffiti to all my American Lit classes, I think 2 different times, and they loved it both times. And the basic arc with the Ron Howard character and the Richard Dreyfuss character, not sure if they wanted to leave home to go to college. Given the demographic that comes to a place like Tennessee Tech, it was a very relatable narrative arc for those students. Like, they weren't sure if they wanted to go to college, and they did have friends that weren't leaving their provincial small town whatevers to go to, like, going to Cookeville from, you know, rural is not, it's not quite getting on an airplane to fly to the East Coast from LA to some hoity-toity place like those guys were in that movie. But it was really relatable to my students, and they love the car. I mean, anything with that much automobile like swagger in it. But I do have to say, the John Milner character, when he's riding around with the Mackenzie Phillips character, and of course Wolfman Jack is sort of the spiritual, you know, glue of that entire film. He says, "Turn off, I hate that surfer shit." And Mackenzie Phillips is like, "I love the Beach Boys. I think they're boss." And he's like, "I can't stand that surfer shit. Rock and roll died with Buddy Holly." And I just love that. You know, the guys, like, most of the main characters are all like, you know, 19. There's all supposed to be 18, 19. And he's supposed to be like maybe 20 or 22. And he's got that grumpy old man, you know, Homer Simpson, whatever, get off my lawn, yelling at the cloud, you know, "I can't stand that new music. I need some good old Buddy Holly." Anyway, obviously I've memorized the whole movie, but that one's like my favorite freaking scene.
So he's kind of equating the Beach Boys to the Backstreet Boys, if you really want to like equate it.
Yeah, that's what
themselves. Go ahead. Sorry, Rick.
No. What was that, Joe?
I said they brought it on themselves.
No, yeah.
Like those two tracks.
Well, I think that's what really struck me in a way I hadn't thought about before. But the way it didn't dominate that decade, but the way nostalgia made it poked its head up in the 70s. And while y'all were talking, I'm thinking of Andrew, you mentioned Buddy Holly. So, like, Don McLean's American Pie, which is 1971. I mean, that is just a straight up nostalgia song. I mean, he's practically saying that music died with Buddy Holly.
Oh yeah,
and he rips on whether it's the Beach Boys, the Beatles, Dylan. All of it is you know. Oh, we lost Andrew.
That's it. Teacher's gone.
It took some stones to throw stones at all those stones.
Yes, no doubt. It's a weirdly conservative song.
Yeah.
I don't know if people in the 60s were watching shows about the 40s or 30s. You know, I wonder why that, you know, after Vietnam, maybe people just
that would have been hilarious.
Grab on something. Yeah.
I don't know about movies, but, you know, Grapes of Wrath was huge, and Steinbeck was huge. Woody Guthrie was huge. Woody Guthrie was part of all the stuff that was like the Harry Smith anthology stuff that all the 60s folkies were listening to, Carter Family. And in the 60s peace movement and civil rights movement, there was a nostalgia for the left-wing movements of the 30s. During the Great Depression was a great heyday for left-wing ideas in America, because, I mean, obviously capitalism wasn't on its best day during the Great Depression. So I think there was a 30, and it was also before Hitler, before the bomb. So I think there is a lot of nostalgia for the 30s in the 50s, 60s crowd. I'm going to make that case anyway. So yeah, I think this is
that's a good case. My case is more about in media, like in entertainment, you know, as recalling those times with warmth and love and how much better they were and innocent.
Well, I think, see, that's what the Harry Smith anthology, though, because the 78 records were the first popular media. Like, there was there was radio, but then the 78 was like the first time you could take home a record. That was the first time ever. And then with the Depression in World War II, 78 production like bottomed out. And so like, I think it's 27 to 32 was considered to be the heyday of the first wave of recorded popular music. And so when the Harry Smith anthology comes out, and there was also all these other like folk sets, box sets of like folk music. And I think it really did. I think the early 60s folk revival was about a nostalgia for late 20s, early 30s folk music. So I'm leaning in, man. I'm the.
I'm not.
And now, whether there was nostalgia in the 30s for like the zeros or the 1890s, I'm not sure about that, but I bet there probably was too.
I want to go ahead and jump on that, and I'm going to totally take it in a farcical direction, because when we're talking about this, it reminds me of back when VH1 did I Love the 70s, I Love the 80s, and there was one episode, I forget what they were talking about. It was brilliant. I think they were talking about Brian Setzer and how he did the rockabilly, then he did the swing, and then he goes, we'll be talking about Brian Setzer when they do I Love the 30s. Then just like that, they did like a fake graphic of I Love the 30s. I thought it was one of the most brilliant things I'd ever seen.
Yeah, I feel like nostalgia just continuously rolls forward with whatever's 30 years ago.
Yeah.
People in control are thinking about childhood.
It feels like whatever came 20 years before is what we're fixated on.
Yep.
Which is why like the 50s were big in the 70s and the 60s were big in the 80s and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Feel like we're kind of at an end of that discussion. Is there anything else about Elvis or Beach Boys right now?
What if Elvis and the Beach Boys had collaborated? What would that sound?
Ooh, that would be interesting.
Do you think who would be more dominant?
Elvis would have to do the vocals, and then
Like
the Beach Boys would be his backing band.
the Beach Boys would be the Jordanaires.
Right.
The Jordanaires and the Beach Boys. Wow.
Oh, yeah.
I'm guessing it would just mostly be Brian and Elvis and the other Beach Boys like pouting.
I would. We could write a one-act play about a meeting over coffee.
I think that's our next episode.
Brian Wilson, and how little gets actually said. I can't imagine that conversation. Like the shy, tortured
That would
artist.
be a fly on the wall.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for indulging me on this trip down memory lane, y'all. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I liked
thank you for
how,
sharing.
I liked how when Bob Dylan came out with the now I can't say the name of the song during the pandemic. Bob Dylan came out with his American Pie.
So,
early Roman Kings.
Was it that really long song?
Is that it, Rick? Is it Early Roman Kings?
Mm-mm.
What was it called?
Well, he made a reference to the Eagles.
He talked
Makes
about
references to everybody.
It's about John F. Kennedy too.
Right. It is very American Pie like.
Yeah.
And then I was just kind of wondering about that kind of a song, you know, Murder Most Foul.
Is that it?
And
That's it. Yeah.
Yep. So are we ready to start pivoting to what we're listening to? Is that I think okay. Who's gonna go? And if somebody, since we're not doing the segregated screens, if somebody hits on something that you are also listening to that's new, let's all jump in and on that.
Put up a finger, just like +1.
I can start.
Sure.
I can start. So the last time we talked, we'd been sharing Los Tabanos experience, and I got the vinyl, which is an awesome package. And I also, for those of you who haven't checked them out, it's Los Tabanos out in the world. If you're there, they're a Chilean trio. Well, it's a floating number of people, but they do long improv, heavy rock instrumentals, and it's trippy, heavy. It's just like it's good to, I don't know, it's pretty awesome. And the fact that they're from Chile, what American stuff filtered down to them for them to blow those speakers out like that. It's pretty awesome. I learned about that group from an interview with Chuck Prophet, who Scott and I saw at Levon Helm's barn the other day. Another band that was mentioned in that same article was Iglesia Atomica, and this is Los Demonios Andan Sueltos, which I think means the demons are among us. And I don't know if you can see that, but
Cool.
person sucking the brains out of a skull.
Yeah.
This is a Puerto Rican trio similar to Los Tabanos Experience. Again, doing heavy improv, trippy rock. It's awesome. It's just there's no vocals. This band is led by one guy who actually put the vinyl in the mail for me, which is sort of sad. I'm gonna write him a postcard. Like it's his return address. I'm like, dude, you know, it's amazing stuff. Something else Scott and I have been vibing on the last couple of days is this Patterson Hood's first solo record in 12 years, Exploding Trees and Airplane Screams. I'm a huge Drive-By Trucker fan. You guys know that. I've really ignored his solo career completely. I have some of the CDs. I don't go back to it. It's good. It's not the band. This is something else. This is one of the best things it's definitely one of the top 2 or 3 things I've heard. It's the top thing I've heard in the 8 or whatever weeks we've had in this year. It's such a stylistic departure, and what it is the fruit of his friendship with Chris Funk, who's a longtime member and producer of the Decemberists, who got him out of his comfort zone. Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
That
explains it. I mean, he's exploring so many cool different areas on that album that you just wouldn't expect him to.
It's very autobiographical, go reverse chronologically. It's very writerly. It sounds nothing like Drive-By Truckers.
No.
He's got Waxahachie. He's got Wednesday backing him on some tracks. He's got God, who else? Lydia Loveless, who's awesome.
And
Steve Berlin.
Steve Berlin, yes.
Playing sax, baritone sax.
Yeah.
David Barbie. He's got some of the truckers on there, but it's awesome. If you've heard the truckers and we're like, yeah, you know, this is just different. It's just some top flight songwriting.
I second that emotion. And yeah, I've only listened to the album once, but it's so engaging. And the other one I really am digging a lot is Sharon Van Etten and the Attachment Theory. I'm like, I liked her before, but this time out, she is like doing a full-on collaboration with her band, and she's fully embracing the whole dark wave synth thing and just owning it. It's like her territory now. And I'm really engaged by this. And then I am really seriously digging Horse Girls' new one, Phonetics On and On. They're a trio from Chicago. I haven't dug as deep into this as I had the other ones, but songs like 2468 and Julie are just delightful lo-fi earworms. And when I played some of these songs for Joe, he's like, they sound like they're from New Zealand. I'm like, I totally get that. But they're from Chicago, but I totally get the whole New Zealand thing. And while we're at it, I want to thank Joe, because Joe totally made my year. Late in last year, he's like, I got tickets for DBT. Please let me fly you out. And I'm not going to front. I've been unemployed for a year and a half. So that was such an act of kindness that I couldn't say no. And like 2 days before the trip, I found out that I didn't get this job I was seriously gunning for. So what was going to be a good time anyways was just serious, just mental health, self-care. And we saw the Truckers in Port Chester at this beautiful old theater. And then Chuck Prophet at the Levon Helm studio. That was such an experience. It was just, like, even seeing a shitty band there would be magical, but seeing a band as good as Chuck Prophet and the Cumbia Shoes was just, it was so cool. And just being in Woodstock was magical. And I am adding the Tinker Street Tavern to my list of like my favorite places. Other than that, I have been digging the crap out of all the SNL 50 stuff, the special, the concert, the Questlove documentary on the music, and then the 4-part docuseries on Peacock, which includes a whole episode about nothing but the cowbell sketch. Love it all.
So good. I'm still catching up on it, but it's been fun.
Oh, it's so much fun.
Scott, it's not surprising to you or anybody that I'm an easy mark for Woodstock, but though I've not been with either of you,
Yeah.
I've been to Woodstock like 3 times in the last 3 or 4 years, and I'm freaking in love with that place. And Rick and Amy, I cannot implore you all enough to go to Woodstock, the town of Woodstock, New York. It is an unbelievable place.
Can we all just move there?
Let's go.
Can we all?
And I wish I'd been there because I would have dragged you. Oh no, my friend's bookstore is closed for the winter. My friend has a bookstore in his house in Woodstock that is the weirdest, craziest. Joe,
there was a bookstore we tried to go to, but they were closed.
Yeah, that's Golden Notebook. We also went to Big Pink.
I saw the pictures. I'm so amped that y'all did all of that.
You can Airbnb that or whatever.
Right.
If you want to. It's not like the prettiest building, but
no, it's just a house. But
yeah.
Joe, maybe this summer, when we when Jeannie and Barb and I pass through, we can make part of that to Woodstock. But I think I'm not the only one besides you, Greenberg. That Sharon Van Etten album is unreal, and I didn't know, what did you call it? You call it dark wave synth?
Yeah.
Rick, did you know that? I didn't know what I was listening to, but it was funk. It's kind of fun, not funky, but it
definitely some funk in there.
It had that bottom to it, but
I'm full progression from what she was doing previously.
I'm not. Her name was always in my periphery. I just saw a post. Somebody said it was the best album of the year. They said it wasn't the best album of the year so far, like Joe said about Patterson Hood. Somebody posted, this is the best album of 2025. And I remember last year between Alinda Segarra and Willie Carlisle, I was already locked in by this time last year for the whole year with my 2 favorite albums. So I think the Sharon Van Etten's might be one that I'm just locked into it'll be one of my albums of the year, because it is very good and extremely moving.
And
praise.
I love that so far I've got a couple of albums I'm passionate about, and it's only February. By the way, your boy Willie is playing in Charlotte sometime soon.
Are you going to go?
If you go, yes. If you don't come with me, then I will probably skip it.
Okay. Well, next time, because I've already got one of his. I'm looking at maybe a second, but I'm going to go see him in Newport. If no one's ever been to Cincinnati area, the Kentucky side of Cincinnati is actually really cool. There's Covington and Newport on the Ohio River. They're basically Cincinnati suburbs on the Kentucky side. And there's an old church that they converted into a venue. And they have 3 venues. They have the main room, which is like an old sanctuary. And then there's like a smaller room that's like where there's a bar and a pool table. And that one's always no cover. And they usually put a band on in that room. And then there's the upstairs room that's like the smaller stage. And that's where Willie plays, is on the smaller stage. But it's one of the neatest venues I've ever been to.
Speaking of venues that used to be churches, have you ever seen shows back home in Detroit at the Trinity House? You're not. Does it ring any bells?
It rings.
Is this a current venue or an older venue?
I'd say they've been most active over the last 20 years, but my friend Bill Keith runs it, and it's usually a lot of under the radar alt country rap acts. I saw Jason Ringenberg there once. I played there with Manchel. But yeah, it's like an old converted church next to a Buco de Beppo. And there's like a tiny little graveyard in the back. It is so cool.
My heart hurts that I haven't heard of it before tonight, but I'm going to, if it's still going, I'll check it out.
Yeah.
Sure.
Amy, what are you listening to?
Yeah. Let's see. I took notes. I'm going to bring my clipboard over here. The
clipboard.
I know.
Magenta.
New album from Bartees Strange just came out. You know, he was my favorite year or 2 ago when his first album came out. So I'm stoked for this one. After first listen through, it's just more really rad stuff. Let's see. I'll talk about my Bonnaroo pick of the week. I'm still working through looking at the lineup and finding some new discoveries. I'm trying not to find anything that I love too much so that my schedule isn't distressingly stacked, but we'll get there. What I did find was an artist on Sunday called Barry Can't Swim. Barry, like the name. Mm-hmm. The DJ, it's like one guy, it's electronic music. His name is not Barry. Not sure whether or not he can swim, but Barry Can't Swim is the name of the artist.
Right.
His album When We Will Land came out in 23, and I'm really hooked on it. It's kind of house music, but it's way more artsy and interesting than that. A lot of stuff going on. It's cool music. So that's that pick. Let's see, talking about shows, Andrew and I went to a really special show a couple weeks ago here in Nashville. Teacher on the Radio got to have Flamey Grant on as a guest, and we got to see her perform, drag queen singing about Christianity, and just very unique act. And she's touring and performing with an artist that I've loved since I was a kid, because she was a contemporary Christian artist, Jennifer Knapp. And her story is that she was an artist that came out as queer like 15 years ago or so, and just really shook culture, and big deal. So she's really cool and still so talented. Just kind of devastating to see that the popularity she was at the peak of her career within CCM kind of turned when she came out, and she's just playing a little show at the Vanderbilt Divinity. Andrew, do you want to add anything about that experience?
Well, what's kind of amazing, it was a Thursday night. It was the night of tornado warnings all over Middle Tennessee. And I don't know how well promoted it was, but people did turn out. At first, I thought it was going to be poorly underattended, but by the time the show actually started, it was a great turnout, and people were incredibly enthusiastic. But the highlight for me, in a weird way, so Flamey took the house. I mean, not that Jennifer didn't put on a great show, but Flamey is a drag queen. So when Flamey uses she, they pronouns, but when Flamey's not performing, Flamey looks more like Joe, but Flamey's a big girl. Flamey is a real big girl. And with the hair and the makeup and everything, her presence on the stage is just kind of overwhelming, and her voice really carries. I mean, she's got some pipes, and it's so affirming and it's not ironic. Like in the interview, which I guess you listened to, I kind of challenged her a little bit about, why aren't you just doing more of more like a Saturday Night Live, takedown version of Flamey Grant, instead of, like, she's not doing that. She's very authentic in what her expression is, and it's very joyful, and it's not necessarily about Jesus per se, but about people of faith, of all faiths, who have a yearning for goodness and justice and truth. And it is funny. Don't get me wrong. She has some really funny lines in there. Right. So it's not without humor, but it's not like a smackdown of the church. It's a little bit different. And so as I'm leaving this venue, there is this incredibly fabulous person. I think I had pointed them out to you. Oh, you were still walking with me. So
I was with you. Yeah.
So all of a sudden we see this very young, effeminate male. And I mean, I asked them their pronouns because I wasn't sure if it was a boy or a girl, and that's okay. And this is the kind of scene where it's okay to be whatever. But she had the most fabulous outfit on. And I'm like, who are you with? Oh, this is my mom and dad. And they were like the whitest Nashville people. They were so white. They had a white pickup truck to get into with them. And he had a Southern accent, and they were like preppy, upper middle class, super white Nashville parents.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I would have, if I saw them without their child, their adult child, who was as queer as every $3 bill that I've ever had, that I would not have thought that they were the way that they were. And they were so proud to be at this Flamey Grant concert with their queer child. And they both the mom and dad they were all smiles and all these like fabulous things to say about the show. And I could just tell that they were proud to be. And so of course I had my mom, Barb was with me too. It was Amy, me, and my mom. So I was like, oh, well, here's my mom. It was just a really sweet and tender moment, and gave me hope for the very white people of Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah, it was a real affirming night, just getting to hang out with y'all. But what Flamey and Jennifer Knapp had to share on stage was just good for my heart. So the power of music.
I just love the fact that somebody like Flamey Grant is out there because she's making like little minds explode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of new records, and not the only one that has gotten really totally under my skin is the Sharon Van Etten. But I've actually listened to the new Lumineers album, and I know like arena folk might not be like, but this is a good year for arena folk. So Lumineers have a new one. Mumfords are going to have a new one here in a minute. So Stadium Folk is alive and well. The new Lumineers is excellent. Bonnie Prince Billy's new album, The Purple Bird, I think is phenomenal. And just out last week, new Sunny War, Armageddon in a Dress, and Middle by Jesse Wells. And Jesse Wells is, I mean, he's the TikTok guy that puts out a Bob Dylan manifesto song every single day, and then puts out about 3 albums a year. As his, I think Jesse's like 3rd album within the last 12 months. Just dropped on Friday. Yeah.
Well, that's perfect. I mean, I know we're up against the time, so I'm just going to echo what many of you have already said. I can't wait to listen to the Patterson Hood album. I'm very excited about that. But I'm with Amy about the Bartees Strange horror album. It is fantastic. And just such a fascinating, you can't pin it down for a genre, but it is such an enveloping listen. I love I'm really enjoying this new Sunny War album. Andrew and I had excitedly messaged back and forth about the song Walking Contradiction. Listen to that. It is a real, it's a great song and timely. And I was listening to the new Jesse Wells album on my walk this afternoon, and it's great. There's a lot more production. There's some of his In the Woods songs that have been put into a broader sound stage, and it's exciting to see where he's going to go. And I kick myself daily for not jumping on those Basement East tickets because it is sold out.
So Amy,
Yes.
I know that when you brought up Bartees Strange, that took me back a couple of years ago because you had mentioned your love for Bartees a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
What is a Bartees song, like a singular song, that you would recommend to somebody to do as Andy would say, the jumping off point?
Let's see. Well, the very first song he released, I don't think it's on the album I loved in 23, but the first song I got into was, I think, called Mustang, which is, I guess, about where he grew up, Mustang, Oklahoma.
Okay.
I just read his bio. He was born in the UK, I think, but grew up in Oklahoma. So just interesting guy. But I think his story is that like he just wasn't like anybody there. So he turned to music to kind of get through. But anyways, it's like has that emo post-hardcore genre to it, but it's just something else.
Right.
So.
And I like that he went from UK to OK.
Yeah. I don't know, Rick, do you have a
I'll show
song you could pull?
No, I defer to you.
Yeah, I'll build us a playlist to look at, and I'll make sure one of those is on there.
All right.
Are there any upcoming albums people are stoked on, looking forward to? So I have. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I have Lady Gaga and Hamilton Lethauser. Not together, 2 separate albums.
So that would be kind of weird if they did. I've got shows I'm excited about.
Yeah.
I can't remember what's coming out, but I'm going to see Caroline Rose doing like a stripped down solo thing in mid-March. And like a few days later, I have another really, really cool friend who surprised me and is taking me to see Kraftwerk.
Yeah.
It'll be my second time seeing them. First time was with Andy at the Ryman. So I thought, okay, I saw Kraftwerk once, great, but getting to see them again is a gift.
So a month from today, roughly, I think it is exactly a month from today, we're going to be talking about the Jason Isbell new solo acoustic album, Foxes in the Snow, which comes out on March the 7th. And we're going to be speaking of the new My Morning Jacket album. It's got a really it's called Is, I think, and it comes out on March the 21st. I want to give a plug for Teacher on the Radio. If Joe and I stick to our guns, this coming Saturday, Joe is going to be co-hosting Teacher on the Radio with me, and we are going to be I'm doing a whole 1990s series on Teacher on the Radio, and for like several months, I think of a couple of months of all 90s shows. And Joe has done a great job with Canadian artists in the 1990s, and with all the weirdness in the air about Canada, it just seems like a perfect time to give our siblings from the North all the love that we possibly can give them. So Joe's curated the entire track listing, and I'm going to interview or have Joe kind of just bring in a little bit of wisdom to me. I want to give a plug for the 90s on my current listening that I didn't get to yet. Really quickly, I'm just going to throw up a bunch of hippie-looking people on the screen here really quickly. So I started to like realize that I almost missed all of the 90s hippie. Now, I'm sure like Blues Traveler and Dave Matthews Band and Spin Doctors and groups like this, but there was a humongous like new hippie scene in the 90s, and some of it borderline with what today we would call Americana and would be seen more as alternative rock or folk or Americana. So on the slide we have at the top left we have Grantley Buffalo, on the right we have Rusted Root, and on the bottom we have Poi Dog Pondering. And I have been on a deep like 90s kind of like vibey thing, and I
can't believe you'd never heard Rusted Root before.
No, but I wasn't into them in the 90s. No, I've known about them. I've known about Rusted Root since about 2000. And the Poi Dogs I knew from '89 from their debut album, but I never listened to any of the albums that Poi Dog made after the 1989
Pomegranate's
album.
Pretty fabulous.
So I had to go back and revisit all the rest of the Poi Dog catalog. No, I got turned on to Rusted Root around the turn of the century, but I hadn't listened to them in 15 years probably with any attention. And Grantley Buffalo was completely brand new to me. No, I'd say probably of all the 90s stuff I've been listening to, about 80% of it is new and about 20% of it is revisiting. And of course I know everything about, not everything I should say, but I know a lot more about the genre that we've looked at with like Mother Love Bone and all of that kind of stuff. But I didn't really know how much just totally patchouli soaked hippie shit there was out there in the 90s. And I probably would have been an easy mark for that, except I went more punk rock in the 90s. And then I went to where I couldn't afford music. Like, I don't know.
What about Michael Franti and Spearhead? Did you get on board with that?
Oh God, that was, yes. And I was with them during that time, like Disposable Heroes of Hypocrisy.
Yep.
I was even into the Beatniks, which was his punk band that was that was on SST Records, and then he had Disposable Heroes. Yeah, and he's turned really like into like beach rock, He's really lost his songwriting muscle, unfortunately.
Fronte?
Yeah.
Beach rock. That's damning.
Yeah. I mean, what was that?
It's like yacht rock if you don't even have a yacht.
That's it's just
it's like yoga at a resort, beach rock for like middle-aged people who can afford his yoga.
I thought that's all Michael Franti was ever, but you're telling me he was cool.
Oh, television.
Oh, you had no idea, Amy?
Not really.
No, he was more than cool. He was like avant-garde badass up to the extreme.
He was like Gil Scott-Heron at his best.
Yes, he was like freaking unbelievable. Like, he was like Chuck D. He was kind of like the more mellow Chuck D. I mean, he was fierce.
If you take Disposable Heroes, Television, the Drug of the Nation, and put it up against The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, you are in for a treat.
All right.
And then
report back after the deep dive.
Yeah, he had an album called Chocolate Superhighway that was weird, but it like took place in like a weird alternate unit. It was like a concept album.
Right.
But yeah, but his first album as Spearhead that came out in '94 is an absolutely it's R&B, it's rock, it's soul, it's a little bit of hip hop. He was good until about 2008, and I think it's only in the teens and the 20s that he's turned into this kind of like more like, you know, just very happy, very mellow, without a lot of substance stuff. And he's like, and it's kind of like, you know, Ziggy Marley B-sides. I mean, it's not even that good at that anymore, you know. And he used to be so good.
Kind of like Modest Yahoo kind of went that route too.
Who?
Modest Yahoo.
The Rapping Rabbi.
I remember his first album. I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
There's
only one room for one rapping rabbi in the world, and you know, someone had to get there first. You know, it's like you get there, you corner the market. I'm trying, but I was trying to remember the Michael Franti and Spearhead song that's on the Wire soundtrack.
Oh,
my God! Oh, that's a great. I don't know if that's the title. It's not on. What's that?
Hole in My Pocket?
No.
No. I know the one you're talking. I know the one you're talking about. Oh my God. Oh, I know exactly the one you're talking about. And it is out there. He has some stuff. Some of the stuff is not like it was Michael Franti and Spearhead without so he's performed under a couple of different iterations of that, but it is out there, I think, that song that you're talking about.
All right, I got to track it down.
I'm gonna find it for you. I want to listen to it right now. We are over the hour. Thank you so much, Rick, for leading us off.
Thank y'all.
Yeah, that was super fun.
Until next month, let's do Monday, March 24th, if that's okay with everybody.
Andy Fest.
And I think we have to switch back to an hour later because the time's going to change. I like doing it early when it's dark, but if it's light out till that late, I won't even have had my supper yet. So 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central, a month from tonight.
All right.
But I'll probably
See you then, folks.
On 8:45.
See y'all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.